Welcome one and all, it's time for another lockdown hobby time. And you may have noticed that my painting supplies have arrived. So we've got the Grotesques back out. Not only do we have these lovely 6 paints lined up here, with the tops all nicely coloured in by me, although this one doesn't seem to have anything printed on the label, so I can't even remember what this one's called. But they're all game colour. The main one that I need for the Grotesques is this one here, this gory red, because we're going to be doing the insides of mouths and other such grotesque details. But we've also got, so we can actually continue with the Night Stalkers, we've got Squid Pink, Hexed, Lichen, or however you would like to pronounce that, and then this one, this one might be called Warlord Purple perhaps, but it doesn't have anything on the label for some reason. We've also got a new yellow because this one is all drying up and terrible. And we've also got a brand new orange because this one is rapidly running out. As you can imagine, the orange is quite commonly used in my painting adventures. So let's put all of the ones we're not going to use right now to one side. Rapidly running out of space in the painting area. I'd need a wall-mounted paint rack really, right behind where this camera is located. That would be nice. So I should look into that. And this bad boy is going to come out first. And the wet palette already moistened up this sponge that comes with it. So this is an Army Painter wet palette, and it has a lid that can go on it as well to keep it nice and moist and it won't dry out. I've had other wet palettes before that I made myself using various household items, but I always found that I lost motivation to keep them maintained and they fell into disrepair and then I could never be bothered doing it again. So the fact that I've actually purchased one, maybe I'll stick with it this time. We'll see how well it works. Moistened up the sponge, put the paper on top of the sponge, and now we're going to apply some paint to the paper on top of the wet sponge. Very exciting times ahead, and hopefully that will not dry up anytime soon. Splodge. Okay, so first things first, who shall we start with? Let's start with this guy. This is going to be like he's the mini champion in the unit, kind of. And I've got the extra fancy lighting set up here where I've got my phone with the torch feature pointing directly at the miniature. So you can actually see all the paintwork that's gone on here. And I think they're looking pretty sweet. Even the eyeballs have had work on them. However, I'm thinking the eyeballs might need something else in the future rather than just being yellow. There are 3 eyes. Your eyes are not deceiving you. Maybe some kind of black, not necessarily a black dot in the middle, that might look silly, but maybe a black stroke down the centre, like a cat's eye, perhaps. That could be interesting. So, let us select a brush. Doesn't need to be the tiniest fine detail brush because we're going to be going into the mouth and some exposed flesh around the spikes that are poking out of the skin. So what kind of brush do we want? We want a decent point, but not the most ridiculous point ever. Let's see what we've got here. Maybe this one. So this is just a cheap brush, but it's got a decent enough point on it, and we'll see how this one fares. So we're going to start off, and we're going to paint inside the mouth. I don't expect this to be too bold a colour. That's why I'm not using a bright red, because I want it to be dark. I don't want it to stand out too much. I don't want the inside of the mouth to be the part that draws the eye. It might be the last thing you see when you're facing one of these things. I'm also pondering doing the tops of the gums in this colour as well, so I might actually want the fine detail brush for that. Hopefully you can see that on the camera that there is a bit of a difference inside his mouth already. And I think I might be about to sneeze. There were 2 sneezes, in fact. So we'll save the gums And we'll get this very fine detail brush out later for that. So we're going to go onto the shins now, around this protruding bone. I'm not sure there's going to be any highlight required on this, because this is more of a background colour. After I've done this, there's not really much left to do on these guys, apart from tidying up. I've avoided tidying up any of the skin areas so far, because I'm going to have to mix a colour that looks suitable, and I didn't want to do that multiple times. In some ways, this colour in here is acting as a bit of a highlight, because I'm not tucking it all the way into the corners, necessarily. If anyone's got any comments or questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as usual. So, I don't know if you can see very well that colour, but hopefully you can. That's what I've been waiting for, this colour. We've got Steve and Graham in the chat, as always. Hello. Okay, next bit of exposed flesh. We've got some on the thigh right here. The two champion models have the most areas like this on them, I think. So I don't think this is going to be a hugely long process. So we might actually be able to get these guys finished today. Apart from the varnish, which isn't the most exciting step, so I could always just do that off camera at a later time. Unless you want me to save that specifically so you can see my brush on varnishing technique. I don't think it's going to be that exciting now. Painting exposed leg flesh, where the spikes have torn out. They're such hideous mutant monstrosities, and the flesh that was torn back reveals this rather hideous open wound. And on this thigh as well. Graham's Mantic order turned up this morning. What did you order? Because my paints came from Mantic, and they were dispatched last week and only just arrived today. So I think the various postal services are in a bit of a log jam at the moment. Okay, there's the shin areas done. Now he's also got some spots around the nipple as well, around the nipple spikes. But I might save those for the fine detail brush as well. And I think those are really the only areas that need to be done on this guy. So he's just waiting for the fine detail now for the nipples and the gums. So let's move on to this guy. And I don't know how many areas these other models have that I'll want to be using this colour for. They definitely have open mouths though. Anyone who missed it last night, it was the glorious return of the Andy and Rem show, which heralded much excitement in the community, as I'm sure you can imagine. not sure there's anything else that needs to be done on this guy. He does have things poking out of him, but I'm not sure any of those things that are poking out have left any areas of exposed flesh that need to be worked on. I think for these two, it's just going to be the inside of the mouth. And again, I'll wait till I've got the fine detail brush out for the gums, so we don't make a mess of that. And the other one in the same pose as him. Well, slightly different pose because I fiddled with it, but same model, so he'll have the same areas. Okay, got a bit of paint inadvertently on some of the teeth there, but that is all right. I'll just have to touch over them in a minute. Yeah, these guys' mouths are a bit smaller than the other one. It's not open quite as wide. Let's see these. Yeah, this one's all right. I think I can get this brush in there. And does he have any exposed flesh? I think he's got a bit around these spikes coming out the back of his legs. I think this guy's got a little bit I would want to pick out. Does look like more of a fresh wound. And on the other leg. Okay, I think that's that. Maybe a little bit strayed onto the grey there. Okay. I think that's it for him. So you know what, I'm going to skip to this guy because I know he's got bits that don't need the fine detail brush. And then we'll go back and get that brush out momentarily after we've finished some of these areas. He doesn't actually have any exposed gums, at least not on the top. He might have a little bit at the bottom there. Onto the shins again. So it's very exciting at this stage because they're so close to being finished. After this colour, it's just going to be some touch-ups and then it'll be all done. Graham's order contained Vanguard Goblins, a Wingit, and a Moor Pup launcher. Yeah, very nice. Not a bad start for a Goblin Vanguard warband there. I do have a partially painted Wingit lying around, but no real motivation to get on with it at the moment because I don't have any current plans to get the goblins out yet in this edition. It will happen at some point. But I need that added motivation of knowing I'm going to get them out on the table. So after I've finished this colour, I'm going to show you, because I did a bit more work on my Grot Mega Tank that I was working on yesterday. And you can see where I've got up to with that. I didn't do any new steps, because I want that to be captured on video, but I did finish the steps that I was on. Yeah, this guy's shin isn't that visible here because he's got a chain wrapped around his leg, but there is a bit. Any other spots? Just little bits here and there. Okay, and he's got the nipples that need to be done as well, but not right now. And we just need the fine detail brush out now. So because I've got a wet palette, I don't have to worry about this paint drying up too fast, so I can take my time, which is nice. Nice and relaxing. So let's soap down this brush. We've got Bazooka in the chat. Hello there. Steve says, I enjoyed the show last night even though I have no interest in AOS. Shocked how many thumbs down you got for it. Yes. Yeah, there were quite a few. Although, looking at my channel stats right in front of me here, so most of my videos, these live streams I've been doing, obviously it's not the usual content people have been used to on my channel, so I haven't been expecting a huge amount of views. Each one is closing in on about 100 views, about 7 likes on each one, which is fair enough. The Indian Rim Show last night, 284 views, 49 likes already. And that's pretty tasty. So I think there's only about 5 or 6 dislikes on it. And they were all very early in the show, I think. People who just saw that it was going on and thought, you know what? How dare those guys disappear for 2 years and not do a show? I'm going to dislike it. But obviously that is some solid engagement there, tons of likes. So we are thinking about turning it back to weekly again for now, while we've got something to talk about. And Bazooka says Remington brings in the views. Well, if that was true, then the Vermintide episodes would also have billions of views on them as well, wouldn't they? So I'm not going to land the blame for the boost in ratings purely at Mr. Remington's door. So the Grot Mega Tank I was working on here is what it looks like at the moment. You'll recall that I was working on... There's too many paints here now, there's not enough space. Let's move some of them out of the way. There we go. So, I was working on this pattern, which again, in front of the camera, it looks better than it does in real life at the moment. But I was painting like these black spikes coming down onto these panels, and the way that the light hits it from my lighting setup, it makes these look like red mountains with a highlight going on, even though they're actually not. So that inspired me to actually paint them that way. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a bit of an orange highlight where it seems like there's one on the camera, but it's not actually there. And they're going to look like mountains all around, and there's more on the front there, and on the sides, and even on the back, and on the top as well, on the turret. So I think this is going to look pretty sweet when it's finished now that I've actually got a plan for it. I think people will be very excited about that. So we'll put that away for now. And it's time to whip out the fine detail brush, which is located right here. So many paints. I do need to reorganize my paint area. So I set it up specifically to house all the paints I had at that time, and I must have gained maybe 20 new ones since then. Okay, time for the fine detail brush. So let's start with this guy and his mighty nipple spikes and his gums as well. So here we go. Onto the gums. And I'm not sure the gums are really visible in the bottom of the mouth there. So straight to the nipples. It's exciting stuff. And the other nipples. Okay, there we go. Hopefully you can see the difference in the colour in the light, but I wouldn't bet on it too much. It's not that bold. Next guy. He's got some gums that need to be done. Quite prominent gums on this chap. Okay, that's him done. Next. More gums. And this guy needs his teeth fixing as well because I got a little bit of the red in the wrong place before. And if there's going to be blood on his teeth, I want it to be intentional. This guy, does he really have any gums? Maybe the top, like the inside of his mouth there above the teeth, but not really much visible there at all. So that's him done. Next. Do the same for him. And finally, the champion. He needs a bit of nipple work. And the other side. Okay. And I think we are done with that colour now. And there's still a big splodge of it on the wet palette there that can haunt me for a while. What's everyone else working on today? Something very exciting, no doubt. I think we need to start a petition to stop Mr. Bazooka working on Space Marines and to pick something else. Because really, who gets excited about Space Marines anymore? Not the cool kids, that's for certain. Okay, what shall we do next? Should we start fixing up the skin on these guys? And then they'll be pretty much done at that point. We need a colour for the skin. So they're kind of browny, kind of orangey. What is the base colour there? What's the closest thing we've got to it? I could actually mix something with this colour that I've got here, because it's not far off. It's just a little bit too dark, a little bit too deep. Maybe I could try mixing some orange or some brown with that. Let's have a go. Put a bit of orange next door here. It wants to come out today. And we don't want to be mixing with a fine detail brush, that would be suicide. So let's go with this one here and see what it looks like. So we'll take a big splodge of that. And a splodge of that. And let's see what we come up with. That's a bit too bright, I think. Let's add some more of this. And maybe we could add a little bit of brown in there as well. Where is the brown? Should be able to find it since I've marked all the tops of the paints. Unless I haven't done that one. Unless it's from a different range. Oh, there we go. Beastie Brown. And what is the camera trying to focus on here? What nonsense was that? Okay, let's splodge a bit of Beastie Brown in there. That's just a bubble. There we go. Quite reddish, isn't it? Needs to be a little bit darker, I think. I'm not an expert at mixing colours by any means, as you can tell. So let's give this colour a try then. Okay, who's got some flesh that needs fixing? Let's see how this looks. Okay, so that is definitely too light. So I think I'm going to put more brown in that. It's too reddish at the moment. Let's try a huge splodge of brown in there and see what happens. Just mix them all up there. And this is how you waste this paper, by filling up half of it with a mixed colour that isn't even right yet. Let's try that. Nope, that's quite red. Okay, that's what it calls for. Black. This is some deep experimentation we're doing here, folks. Anyone who knows anything about colours is probably screaming at their screen right now about this horrific attempt. Okay, let's try that now. I'm going to try and remove some of that wet paint that's there at the moment. And let's dive in with this. I'm going to try it on an unrelated area that I can wipe it off from afterwards. See how it looks. That looks okay, actually. I found a colour that kind of works for this purpose. Yeah, I think I can live with that so far. Looking alright. Okay. Time to find and eliminate any mistakes using this colour now. Was expecting to find more. But then again, I am a top-notch pro painter now. Anything that shouldn't be there. It will disguise all my sins. Aha, the area between this chain link here. That's something I spotted a while ago that was a potential for the skin treatment. Okay, I think I'm satisfied with that. If you look closely, you'll probably spot that it's not exactly the same colour, but it's close enough. And they're pretty grotesque, and the colours are quite varied across the skin anyway. So I think it should help disguise those mistakes. I am partially colourblind, so I could be making a horrible mess of this, but who cares really? If it looks fine to me, that's the most important thing. Well, actually, the most important thing is posting up the finished pictures of them and then bathing in the admiration of my peers once they are completed. I'm concerned that I'm not seeing that many mistakes, because that means if there are any, they're hiding, waiting to be found. Found one. I have just spotted a bit that I could do in that gory red colour as well, but I think I've soiled all of it here, so I'm going to get a little bit of that natural colour out here. Mr. Trainer just finished a Mantic Giant today. Lovely. I assume there's pictures of that somewhere on the Facebook. Steve's just started Skulk Outriders. So, the areas around his claws on the hand here are a prime spot for this exposed flesh colour that I didn't spot before. I think it's going to look pretty nice there. Okay, next. So I'll do this bit first and then I'll go back to touching up the skin. And then hopefully there's not anything else that needs fixing on them after that. There might be, but I haven't spotted anything obvious so far. Okay, time to start fixing this guy's skin. Very close to these guys being finished, and then of course once they are finished they're going to free up some space on the painting table as well. Because at the moment they're hogging all my spray paint lids that I use as model holders when I'm painting. Paint handles, as they call them nowadays. Any skin repairs for you? Seems like I was very careful with all these colours. I'm not seeing too many mistakes at all. That's the thing with doing all the skin first. Every other detail touches that skin. So I think it does make you extra careful. A little bit on the top of his head here. Any more? If you just do the base coats for every area of the model first, sometimes you can get a bit sloppy because you think, well, no area's done yet, so I've got time to go back and fix it. But when you've completely finished one part, there's no room for error, almost. Because you know that going back and fixing it later is going to be much more annoying once that area is already complete. Oh, there's a Tiny bit of a mistake there. Just a bit of paint straight off one of the horns. And a bit down on this toe. After I've done this, I'm going to get the tooth colour out again and fix up some of the teeth that had become corrupted. Okay, I think that's him sorted. And now this guy. I'm obviously looking forward to the eventual end of lockdown and the ability to play games again. But I'm still not sure whether I'm going to resort to any of the electronic methods of playing Kings of War. I'm much more likely to have a game on the table with the camera pointing at it than I am to attempt Universal Battle or Tabletop Simulator at this stage. But those are things I would have to resort to eventually if lockdown lasts a lot longer. If it goes on for months and months and months. Okay, I think his skin is nicely fixed up now. Unless I remember there was a mistake on one of the arms with one of these guys where the stone strayed a bit into the flesh. And I haven't spotted it so far. Does that mean it doesn't exist, or does it just mean I've missed it? Maybe back on this guy. Okay, and now the champion. Just got to touch up his skin, and then I think they're pretty much done, unless I want to do any more detail on the eyes, which is debatable because they do look alright. So, did I already touch up his skin at all? I don't think so. But are there actually any mistakes worth fixing on this guy? So this Army Painter wet palette, it comes with 2 of these sponges to go underneath, and I think it's 50 of these paper sheets to go on top. And obviously you can use other things on top of it as well. So it's not imperative that you keep buying their stuff to replenish it. I don't think they even do a refill pack. Not that I've seen anyway. but any similar product is obviously going to do exactly the same job. I just like the fact that you can close it up. It's designed for this purpose, and it's going to encourage me to look after it because I've actually paid money for it. Maybe I should have cashed in my A-list celebrity status and told Army Painter that I wanted to review one of them. But I don't think that's really a good idea, considering this isn't really a painting channel usually. I can't really offer any expert painting advice to many people out there, especially not when it comes to different products. I obviously don't have experience with other wet palettes. I wouldn't be able to judge it against any of them. Only the one that I made, which was very crude. Are we done here? We might actually be finished with the grotesques apart from the varnish. Maybe a little bit in there. Okay, I think we might be good. We've got Brad in the chat. Welcome to this exciting, momentous occasion. The debut of the Army Painter wet palette, on my channel anyway, and the arrival of the paints that have allowed me to actually finish the grotesques. And I think they're finished, but I'm going to let the audience tell me whether you think they need something more. So I'm going to show you precisely what I'm talking about here. Let's grab one of them. So, the eyes. They almost wanted to focus on him there. Let's put something behind him. Is that going to help, or is it just going to make things worse? I think you can see roughly what I'm talking about anyway. So, the eyes. 3 of them on each guy. Are they fine just yellow? Do they need something extra? If so, what? Do they need a black dot? Do they need a black line down them? Do they need some white in there? Do they need anything? What do you think? Do they need a lighter yellow, a highlight just on the very center or the top of the eye? Can they just remain yellow? At the moment, they're just yellow with a yellow wash over it to blend it in a bit. What do you think? Do they need more in the eye department? Because that's really the only thing left to do on them now, if that is the case. If they don't need anything, I think I'm fairly confident they are 100% complete now, apart from the varnish, which is obviously very exciting news. So let me know ASAP what you think about that. If they don't need any more work, we can just work on something else for a little while, and then they would be ready to be varnished, which could even happen tonight. And then they could go on the base later or tomorrow. Wouldn't that be exciting? Because with the Army Painter matte varnish that I use, which is this one here, this is brush on, and I don't like to handle the models for at least an hour after applying it. I'm not sure what the recommended drying time on it is, but that's just my personal way of going about it. When it comes to gloss varnish, I leave it even longer than that. But again, that's probably just me being extra safe. I'm not sure it's entirely necessary to wait that long. So just waiting to hear what people think about the grotesque eyeballs, whether they need anything else. whether these eyes need more work on them, or whether you think they look snazzy enough as they are. I did just remember that I need to add a little bit to the teeth, though, on one of them. So which one was it where I got a bit of red on his teeth by mistake? Might have been this guy. Yes, it was. So we've already got the fine detail brush out. Let's get some bone colour. And fix up his teeth real good. Okay, here we go. Okay, and then there's a little bit of unwanted bone around the inside of the mouth there. So, what does anyone think? Do the eyes need more work, or are they fine as they are? I don't usually like adding little dots in monster eyeballs. Okay, let's just fix that teeny little bit of mistake there. Okay, teeth done. I'm going to look at the actual artwork for the Grotesques and see what they've done with the eyeballs. So I've got the box back here. Let's have a look. So they've got a little black line down them, which makes them look a little bit weird and cross-eyed, but maybe also cool. So I'm looking very closely at this now. Let's put it in front of the camera so you can see. Can you see the eyes on the box? I don't know if it's focusing very well on it. There you go. You can see like the slits down the eyes there. Should I do that? They've also got gum highlights as well, these guys. Do I want to highlight the gums with a lighter red? Some of them, the gums aren't particularly visible. I think maybe they've just arbitrarily decided on this particular model where the gum and the tooth separate. Because on the model itself it's not abundantly clear, it just looks like tooth all the way down, but they've got some of it as gum. So I could actually paint a bit of gum onto there. That would be an option, definitely. You know what? I think I will. I'm going in. Okay, and the other guy in that same pose would probably have the same issue. Yeah, let's give him some gums as well. And now that we've done that, do I want to go really crazy? Do I want that tiny black line down the eyes? I could attempt it. I've got a fine detail brush right here. Very tempting. So I could just call them finished, or I could just take a risk and risk messing up the eyeballs and having to do them again. What would you do? Because I'm very tempted to go for the very thin black line, because I've already done so much work on them, it's taken so long. What's one more little step, really? I'm not confident I'll be able to get them looking even, but is that an issue? Let's give it a go. Okay, fine detail brush. Here we go. Do not want, let's see how fine I can get the line on here. That would be okay. Let's see if I can do that on the eyeball. Need to keep it very still. Okay, I've got a bit of a line there. I'm not sure it needs to go all the way down the eye. I think just a bit of a line is actually okay. I don't want to risk messing it up. Let's see if I can do that on the other eyes as well. Not straight down, but kind of at the same angle that the eye is at, possibly. Or straight down, let's try that. Okay, that one doesn't look too bad. Okay, that looks alright actually. I might do a thicker line on the central eye now, because the others have come out a little bit thicker, so I want it to look even. Just trying to make them look very perfect, which isn't really necessary because they're grotesques. Okay, let's have a look. The one on the top needs redoing, I think. I like this one. That one I'm not so sure about. I think it needs evening up a bit. I might just be able to do that with yellow. So I'll continue, I'll do all the black, and then I'll go back and correct them. Joshua is overwhelmed by the return of the Andy and Rob show, can't wait for more. Good. Because you don't have that long to wait. Hopefully every week, for a while at least. Okay, time for more very fine eyeball lines. I've decided I may try to highlight the gums after this as well. Okay, that's a decent line I've got there. Okay, this one has come out closer to perfect than I imagined I would get, so let's have a look. Will it allow a focus on his face? There you go. I think that one's looking really good. If I can get them all looking like that, I think that would be good enough. Okay, let's see if I can replicate that level of quality on the others. My prediction is probably not on all of them. Okay, let's see how this guy looks. I'm not sure he's quite as good. Come on, focus on his face, you know you want to. You know, he's a little bit cross-eyed, isn't he? That eye's looking a bit further to one side than... Oh, you know you want to focus right on his eyeball. How can you even choose not to focus on that? It's right up touching the lens. There we go. Maybe if we make it a little bit of a thicker line on one of the eyes here. Just to try and even it up a little bit. Okay, I think that's not too bad there for him. We just have a look at the one that looked really good again to make sure. Yeah, very much like that one. One of them not great, one of them okay. Now let's move on to these guys. Eating some eyeballs. Okay, quite happy with that first ball there. Second one okay. Okay, since they're hideous mutants, I don't think their eyes need to be looking perfectly in the same direction each time. Let's get him right up in the camera. I think that one looks okay. It doesn't matter that he's looking slightly in a different direction with one of his eyes, because they're hideous mutant freaks anyway. And onto this one. Nope, not happy with the placement of that line. I think the brush is a bit too wet. Okay, let's try that again. Not very satisfied with that one. That one looks alright. Central eyes, maybe too much to one side there. Look at this guy. Yeah, that needs more work. The line at the top needs to be way more in the middle. And then maybe a bit of yellow added in at the edge again. I was aware that this process would probably create more work for myself, but I think it's going to look nice when it's finished, so I think it's worth it. Okay, and the champion doesn't have any eyes, so we don't need to do him. Graham says not only is it a creature out of nightmares that wants to tear me apart, it's disrespecting me pulling faces. Yep, it's a bit disrespectful, isn't it? Making faces at your enemy walking towards them. It's not as bad as, for example, mooning them. Although I do have a model that is doing that as well. My Night Stalkers, which would be this little creature that lives on a hand poking out of the Shadow Hulk's thigh. It's clearly mooning the enemy. Looking forward to painting that. Now that I've got all my purples and pinks, I can actually, at some point, very soon, continue painting this guy and see how he looks when he's done. Because he needs some highlights. Very exciting times. And then after that, we can go on to his twin. Okay. Those eyeball lines were only very fine, so they should be dry by now. I think I'm happy with this guy. I think he's finished in the eyeball department. What about you? I think I was fairly happy with this guy. Was it this guy I was unhappy with? Maybe him? Neither of these look too bad, actually. Maybe this one could use a little touch on one of his eyes. Just a little thickening of the line. I think I'm fairly happy with those two. So let's leave those two as they are. I think these two had some issues in the eye department, though. Needs a bit of yellow on the central eye, and I think this one had similar issues. Yeah, this guy needs a bit of yellow. So let's try out the new yellow, shall we? Here we go. Sun yellow. I need a teensy-weensy amount. I'm going to try to correct the eyeballs. Sometimes it's a case of you just keep having to correct the colours back and forth until it's right. It's very rare on such a fine detail that I'm going to get it all perfect the first time. Or the second time, for that matter. little bit more. Okay, I think that's alright for him. This guy's going to be a bit more tricky because there's a couple more blunders on him. So let's dive in. This is going to be a difficult one. Obviously painting yellow over black isn't ideal. Just being very careful not to overdo it. Okay, I think that has worked. Now we just need a little bit on this other eye here. Very careful. Okay, there's the repair job on his face. What do you think of his eyes now? This one looking a bit weird, perhaps? I think a bit of colour strayed there that I need to correct. Top eye. The black line still looks a little bit to the left, but that's not really a problem. I'm not going in fixing bits of the miniature that you'll never be able to see, but I'm just trying to be perfect. Okay, I think we're done with the eyes. I'm going to highlight the gums now, because I think it's going to look good. And the colour I'm going to use, let's see, because they're that kind of gore red colour, so we need a lighter red to highlight the gums. How much lighter do we want? Do we want to mix a little bit of bloody red with a tiny bit of pink? I think that is going to be the plan here. A very tiny amount of pink. Just want a hint, because we don't want this to draw the eye too much. Okay, that's enough. Just a teensy little bit. Mix it up with this one. As long as it's lighter than the colour underneath, that's fine. It's going to be quite a subtle highlight, this one. So, who's got some gums that want highlighting? This guy's got a couple. it's kind of worked. This is one of those situations where I'd probably like some kind of microscope, because it's so tiny. I'm going to have to go in with a bit of the red now because the highlight's actually covered too much. A bit of the dark red. Okay, who's next? Don't know if any of these details are going to be noticeable at the end. But I've come this far, so I might as well carry on. This guy's got some quite prominent bits here that we could catch. Okay, I think that's all right. Next. And next. Brad apparently usually goes for dark blue gums and tongs for monsters. Well, I don't think there's any particular rule on what colour monsters have to be in any department. Just whatever looks good. And this guy. And finally, the champion. Does he have any visible gums at all? Not really. His teeth are mostly hidden behind his helmet. So, it might actually be completely done, although I have just spotted something I want to touch up on his arm here. Just a couple of tiny little bits that weren't quite perfect. Okay, I'm feeling pretty darn good about these guys at the moment. I'm going to have another check over the eyes though, just to be safe. And after that, they should be completely done. And I need to sneeze again. And we're back from that interruption. So I've been talking to Mr. Remington, and we're thinking that we'll do another Vermintide stream on Thursday, which is tomorrow. So that's quite likely to happen, so keep your eyes peeled for that tomorrow evening, and there's probably going to be another painting stream as well from me in the afternoon. I'm also pondering looking into getting other people in on the painting stream as well, but who? That is the question. We need to match the non-stop high energy that I, of course, emanate from every pore during these things. I was going to leave a really long silence then, but I don't know if that would be the best viewing. Brad says, with the pins, do you drill a hole so that the pin sticks through the base, or do you just sink them into the cork with glue in both cases, of course? It depends. So what I usually do, let's get out a base as an example. So here, when I'm pinning this guy onto a base, it's not actually going to be this one, but it's similar, then I'll start drilling a hole in the cork, and sometimes it does poke through the wood. But ideally I want it to just be slightly into the wood, a little bit, not through all the way. Because then you have to like grind the hole off where the wood's poking out with a knife at the bottom. So usually I just want it to go partially into the wood. It's difficult with this thickness, but with some of them it's easier. So all the way through the cork and then slightly just touching the inside of the wood, hopefully, and then gluing it on that way. Usually I don't intentionally go all the way through the base unless... Let me find an example. Do I have one around here? Not really. If it's a plastic base with... I can show you an example of a plastic base though. It doesn't have to be the right kind I've been using. But if you look at a base like this, there's a hollow bit underneath it. So if the base is like that I'm using, I will actually pin all the way through and then bend over the pin underneath and glue it down there, which makes it even more secure if you're using a base like this. Which is what I've done with my ancient winged half-breed, because that comes on a plastic base with a hollow area underneath. Okay, it's time. Let's just have one final check on everybody to make sure they're done before I put them to one side. Just spotting tiny little things here, which is the idea of doing the like triple or quadruple final check on these things. Because you will spot tiny little bits that you missed. Where's it gone? And then I'm going to check the eyes one final time to make sure I'm fully satisfied with them. And then it's just waiting for the varnish stage then. Okay, I think I'm happy with him. This guy. Am I happy with his eyes? I think I can live with them. The two side eyes are okay. The central eye, the line is not perfectly in the centre, but would an eye ever be looking perfectly in the centre anyway? When it's a hideous monster, would all the eyes be perfectly lined up? I don't think so. So it doesn't matter if one eye is looking slightly the other way. We'll accept that. Because it's a clean line, it's just not perfect placement. And I can deal with it. Also at this point I'm starting to consider which models are on the front rank as well. And where the possible issues are. So would you ever be able to see it when they're in the unit? This guy is on the front rank. And I think I can live with his eye. Next. This guy is not on the front rank. Not spotting any obvious mistakes here. But if there is anything, it'll be so tiny. Okay, next. I think I'm happy with his eyes. Again, one of them's not perfectly lined up with the others, but why would it be? I think I am satisfied with that, although I have just spotted a tiny little mistake next to one of these bones sticking out of his arm. And corrected. Oh, and there's a tiny bit of silver misplaced there. Okay, happy with him. Next, this guy is on the front rank, so I'm happy with him. He's got one eye looking off to the side. In fact, both the eyes are kind of looking to the same side, which I can live with. And the middle eye is looking okay on him as well. Okay, and the middle guy in the unit, this is the mini champion for the unit. I was very happy with his eyes at first glance, and I'm still happy with them. If I was positioning the eye lines on a computer and dragging them pixel by pixel, then I would actually move every single one that I've done probably slightly, but they're perfect enough for hand painting. Any little mistakes anywhere? Speak now, or forever hold your peace. I think he is okay. So, after a little while, to make sure all that paint is 100% dry, it's going to be varnish time, which is always the most exciting part, because the model's finished and the only thing that can possibly happen in the varnish phase is that you ruin the model somehow. You can't improve the paint job because it's already done, so the only way would be downhill. I know some people don't even varnish miniatures at all. Some people don't varnish anything that isn't metal. I varnish everything. I'm going to spend all this time painting miniatures. I want to adequately protect that paint job. So, what shall we go to next? I know. Let's start highlighting this sucker, because we've got purples to work with now. So, which brush do we want? Let's go for this one. Okay, so the purples and pinks that I've got. This one's the most purplish, so this one wouldn't really be a highlight for this colour that's on here at the moment. This one certainly would, so I think I'm going to start with this and then highlight up to pink. Let's compare this to the old school tentacle pink. Very similar, but I think this one's a bit more vibrant. So we're going to start with this one, which doesn't have a label on it. Well, it does, but there's no colour written on it. And yes, I can't believe that some people don't varnish, but apparently it is true. Some people do not varnish anything, and these people are allowed to walk freely among us in society, which I think is quite worrying. So let's see if this is a highlight. Well, it looks like lipstick at the moment. It's going to look quite funny when I've just done his lips. So it's not so much a highlight to the raised areas because I was using contrast paints, so you can already see those are very light. But it just doesn't look good enough to me, it just looks like it's been washed. So I'm kind of starting the highlight process again. So we're going to work back up to a light colour again after this. It's looking a little bit weird at the moment. But this is an experimental process. Was not really a planned out colour scheme. And if I need to paint strip him, it's not going to be that difficult. Tempted to do a dry brush of pink over this when it's finished, because there are lots of little bumps and knobbly bits. The more coverage I get with this colour, the more confident I am in it here. It just looks weird because it's darker than the lightest areas that are already on there. And considering it's meant to be a highlight, that's a strange thing to witness. Steve says crazy people. I assume you're talking about the people who don't varnish their miniatures. Mr. Remington is one such individual. He is not a fan of varnish at all. And if you've seen any of his old metal armies, you would guess that yourself. Beautiful paint jobs, but then a lot of silver elbows. How have you guys stopped your brush hairs from curling? Well, this brush, the hairs are actually curling. And I use mostly cheap brushes that eventually do curl. So I don't need to take that good care of them since they are so cheap. But I think generally the trick is, if you don't want your brush hairs to curl up, carefully wash them with soap probably. Don't get too much paint on the brush at once. Rinse it regularly. Don't store it weirdly. I'm sure there are some more pro tips that people can offer. With this particular brush here, the hairs did all splay out all over the place and I just cut them off when that happened. So eventually it's become not a bad detail brush. But it's going to be worn down to nothing eventually because I keep having to cut more off it. Okay, this is weird because I'm actually making the model look worse intentionally here. So I'm destroying some of the natural highlights that the contrast paint caused, just because I don't think they look good enough, really. I'm going to be attempting a pink dry brush after this. We'll see how that goes. This is truly riveting stuff. Bazooka apparently waved his brushes at Remington to stop them curling. Do the Remington brand of electronic grooming devices, do they do a curler? Okay, so we haven't totally destroyed all the natural highlights that were left in place by the contrast paints, but darkened him up a bit, made him look a bit more gruesome, and then we're going to try a pink dry brush over everything at some point. Let's put him to one side while that all dries. Time to soap down the brush. It's going to be almost time to end this one, I think. Because I'm just waiting for things to dry at the moment. And I might varnish the Grotesques later on this evening off camera, because it's not going to be the most exciting process in the world. And then maybe tomorrow I could attach them to the bases live if I don't get carried away and do that first. So I'm going to put the lid on this thing now. And let's see. Does this thing just go on by itself as the lid, or do you need the other part as well? I think you also need the paintbrush holder part of it. So that plops on there. The brush holder is there. That should keep all the colours nice and wet for tomorrow, in case I want to use any of those for some reason. And it also comes with this handy dandy strap here, which is going to keep it closed and stop it falling open, obviously. So I can just put that to one side. I should be claiming some kind of compensation for Army Painter for promoting their wet palette, shouldn't I? I've missed a trick there. It just puts me one step further back from my ultimate goal of having the vault full of gold coins which I can swim in, like Scrooge McDuck. I suppose the only way that that's really going to happen is if I get to maybe 1,000 patrons a month. I don't think that's going to happen. I think I'm on 5 at the moment. Obviously those 5 are very much appreciated and they really pay for all my painting supplies. The final verdict on the wet palette. Well, I can give you a preliminary verdict because the final verdict won't come until tomorrow or the next day or the day after when we see if all the paints are still nice and wet. But at the moment it's looking good. I was concerned that it was something that I could easily make at home, but the foam that comes with it, it's different to the foam that's the kind of thing I used when I made my own DIY wet palette. So we'll see if this foam is the top-notch stuff that's even better than what you could do at home. I'm sure you could buy the exact foam in this, but the kind of stuff you have lying around your house, maybe that's not it. So we'll be able to judge it fairly over the next few days, I think, and decide how wet it keeps things, how often you have to reapply water to it. We shall see. For now, it's stopped all my paints drying up during the painting process, which they often do, and stopped them having to dry out and me needing to water them down. So I think it's a good start for the wet palette and a promising beginning. So, before I go, you can really look forward now to these guys being finished very soon and being put on the battlefield next to all my other abyssal dwarves. Not necessarily ready to actually destroy anyone unless I organise some over the internet type games. That's quite possible though, that could happen. But they've been on the table way too long now because of this delay in waiting for the paints. They'll be finished very soon, and then it'll be on to the Hellfane and the Night Stalkers. Very, very exciting times lie ahead. And what's coming up? So, tomorrow, hopefully, we can have another Vermintide episode. So you should all obviously tune in for that sometime tomorrow evening, that'll be. And hopefully the Andy and Rem combo can slay plenty of rats and complete some more of the levels there, before we move on to Vermintide 2 at some point, and Space Hulk Deathwing as well, which Mr. Remington also now owns. So that's going to be very exciting. Before I go, I'll just answer any questions that pop up though. Raphael says, what is Andy's favourite Space Marine chapter? Well, I started with Dark Angels when I was about 9 or 10 years old, and I still have Dark Angels. It's a totally new Dark Angels army to the one I had back then. In between those, I did have my own invented Space Marine chapter, which had green armor and blue accessories. It was light green armor, though, not dark. So I think Dark Angels, I like the variety of the Dark Angels, because when you're painting Space Marines, they're all clad in armor, and every single model can end up looking very, very similar. But the fact that they have the 3 different wings in vastly different colour schemes that require a vastly different painting approach, I appreciate that in an army. Yet they're still somehow tied together. The emblems and whatnot are all similar enough so that they don't look like 3 vastly different armies, but they're different enough for painting purposes to keep things interesting, and it keeps the motivation up when you're painting units that aren't all identical. So I think Dark Angels, definitely. Are there any others that I like, though? Off the top of my head, I can't think of any other Space Marine colour schemes that I really enjoy that much. Trying to think of one. I don't know, can you get any cooler than the colours represented in the Dark Angels? I don't think you can, really. I think we're just going to have to leave it on that. Of course, one day, it seems inevitable that I would eventually do an orange Space Marine chapter. Eventually, of course. That seems like it's just inevitable. But it would require a period of time when I'm actually playing a lot of 40k, which isn't right now, definitely. And I've got my orange Necrons that I painted up for kill team purposes mostly, but I could turn them into a full army at some point. They do look quite cool. But is it something I want to invest more in? I don't know. At some point, yeah, one day, if I live long enough, there will be an orange Space Marine chapter done. The only thing that could prevent it is if I die young, I think. So we'll see on that. Okay, before I wrap this up, don't forget to check out all the links in the description. Obviously, all my social media shenanigans down there, Facebook group, Twitter, and all that good stuff. And the various fundraising sources to send me all your life savings on a monthly or one-off basis, which of course everyone, I'm sure, is rushing to do now because they're so enthralled by all this daily, non-stop, red-hot, sizzling, spicy, tasty, juicy, succulent, tender, moist, delicious, delectable, dishlicious content that's flying out of your screens, into your nostrils, arousing your senses, directly onto your taste buds, causing you to drool, while also absorbing all the tasty, nutritious painting goodness. And on that basis, I'm sure everyone is out there pledging just untold amounts of cash to my Patreon down there. And with that, I think all that remains to be said, really. Let's see, who wants to say good night? Who's got the best looking eyes? Let's have this guy. Let's get him right up in the camera. And he's going to sign us out. Let's get him in the perfect spot. There we go. Good night out there, whatever you are.